Have you ever watched a system just completely fall apart? Whether it's a corporate boardroom, a local community group, or even an entire democracy, it's wild to wonder how on earth it pulls itself back from the brink. Today in this explainer, we're going to shift our paradigm entirely. We're looking at democratic recovery not just as some sort of moral issue, but as a complex system reboot. It's so easy to get bogged down in the crazy day-to-day headlines, but today, we're extracting the actual core mechanics of how a destabilized system self-corrects. We're mapping out that exact transition from total fragmentation to coordinated repair. To get us there, we'll quickly map out 6 areas. 1. Rebooting the system. 2. Fixing the incentive machine. 3. The psychology of legitimacy. 4. When recovery fails. 5. Lessons from other systems. And 6. The structural redesign.
Section 1. Rebooting the system. Let's dive right into how a broken machine actually starts shifting gears.
It's really tempting to think a system recovers because people just magically decide to be better, more ethical versions of themselves, right? But relying on moral reform and good intentions is a total trap. Saving a system is entirely about incentive engineering. Think about managing a team. Expecting everyone to just play nice? Yeah, that almost always fails. A complex organization is saved only when the incentives are re-engineered, making rule following tangibly more profitable than rule breaking. It's a cold, calculated restructuring. Multiple actors have to activate restraint at the exact same time. Because if only one side plays by the rules while the other runs wild, the whole reboot just fails.
Section 2. Fixing the incentive machine. So who exactly is operating this thing?
Well, a system only actually recovers when 4 critical gears synchronized to prioritize long-term stability over short-term wins. First up, you've got political parties. They're your primary stabilizers. They face a huge dilemma. Do I do whatever it takes to win today, or do I preserve the norms for tomorrow? Then you have institutional gatekeepers, like courts, acting as the enforcement layer. But they only work if they stay neutral. Third is civil society and voters. They provide the legitimacy, and they have to actively punish those who break the norms. Finally, media systems provide the framing. If even one of these gears strips its teeth and chases a quick win, the entire machine jams up.
And that brings us to an absolute linchpin: legitimacy recalibration. This is the psychological process where opposing forces actually recognize each other as valid competitors again, rather than mortal enemies. Think about a sports match. If you genuinely believe the referee is bought and the other team wants to physically destroy you, you're going to break every rule on the field just to survive, right? You absolutely have to recalibrate. Without it, those institutional gatekeepers we talked about are just seen as weaponized tools, not neutral referees.
Section 3. The psychology of legitimacy. Let's peel back the layers on how this plays out in our heads. Recovery is really a massive coordination problem, driven by a powerful 4-step feedback loop. Step 1 is the consistent enforcement of norms. When people see that actions actually have consequences, you trigger Step 2, reduced violations and restored trust. That naturally flows into Step 3, increased compliance, simply because the system feels predictable again. And finally, that culminates in Step 4, stronger institutions. This repeated reinforcement creates a sort of muscle memory for the system. It learns over time that the guardrails will actually hold.
Now listen, if you remember literally nothing else from this explainer today, remember this. Threat perception reduction is the absolute foundation of recovery. Systems only recover when actors stop treating a political loss as an existential danger. A healthy system requires accepting that losing power is a temporary state, not a terminal one. If you believe losing means you're permanently destroyed, you'll justify doing literally anything to avoid it. True de-escalation depends entirely on downgrading that existential fear.
Section 4. When recovery fails. Because let's be real, singing Kumbaya isn't always enough to save the day.
You have to wonder, when looking at all these modern governance or corporate breakdowns, what exactly causes the stabilization process to stall and crash? Why do some systems figure it out, while others just totally unravel?
Well, the whole thing falls apart under some very specific failure conditions. Recovery completely collapses when opponents are constantly treated as existential threats, and when blatant norm violations just aren't consistently punished. It also fails when polarization gets so deeply rooted into people's identities that a defeat in competition isn't universally accepted. When that happens, institutional legitimacy remains heavily contested because the losing side just automatically assumes the game was rigged. If the rules don't apply evenly, the incentive to follow them vanishes entirely.
Section 5. Lessons from other systems. Let's zoom out a bit to see the bigger picture here.
This isn't just about politics, it is a universal master pattern. Look at financial trading systems. Stability only returns when participants readopt disciplined risk norms after a period of intense volatility. In a game of chess, a losing position requires restoring your structure and reducing tactical overextension. In cybersecurity, recovery literally means coordinated patching and normalizing secure protocols. Even in military and geopolitics, it's all about restoring a deterrence equilibrium and predictable boundaries. Across every single domain, chaotic conflict absolutely must return to rule-bound rivalry.
Section 6. The structural redesign. Let's talk about why pure, blind optimism is actually incredibly dangerous here.
There is a massive, fatal flaw in relying on simple recovery models. They assume elites will just willingly realign their incentives. It completely underestimates the irreversible damage caused by deep polarization and assumes institutions will somehow regain trust without any actual reform. Worst of all, it completely downplays the actors who are actively profiting from the instability. You cannot expect a deeply compromised system to just patch itself up with good vibes alone.
Modern systems show us that when you're dealing with path-dependent erosion, meaning the deeper the crisis, the harder the fix, you need real structural intervention. If a system is fundamentally broken, simply asking people to follow the norms won't cut it. You have to literally restructure the incentives so that bad behavior becomes unprofitable. It requires serious institutional redesign and concrete depolarization mechanisms to actually fix the root issues.
The goal here is absolutely not to eliminate conflict entirely. Robust competition is the engine of innovation everywhere. The real goal is to make sure that disagreeing doesn't threaten to tear the entire system apart. We have to make conflict non-existential again.
So as we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with a crucial question. If our systems only survive when rule following is more rewarding than rule breaking, how can we redesign our own local institutions to guarantee that losing a competition is never perceived as a terminal threat? How do we re-engineer the incentives in our own boardrooms and communities? Because at the end of the day, a system only holds together when everyone trusts that living to fight another day is way better than burning the whole house down today. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer.